the propelling impulse of portals of perception is the sense that we are entering or have entered or are in the middle of a meaningful and important evolutionary upgrade process. And that actually we all have a part to play in this process, in that we can contribute by way of leading, by way of healing, by way of discovery, in a variety of different roles and functions. And there is also the element of looking to discover what of the past is still true and is a necessary bridge to whatever may unfold in the next evolutionary upgrade that is developing in front of our eyes. So there is a function in honoring and harvesting the best of what was as a bridging work for tomorrow. And so today's conversation is about the idea of chivalry. What was chivalry at its core? And how is this core different or separate from the romantic legends that developed about it later? And why did people throughout the ages, really from east to west, throughout many cultures, felt drawn and attracted to chivalrous ideas and values and virtues? And are these just old, outdated kind of ideas, or do they have some validity in this postmodern, cynical, polarized world? So we want to explore these questions today, and for that purpose, we gathered with a group of individuals who are each drawn and attracted to this research, to this work, and to this inquiry. And I would like to begin by asking you first, what attracted you to this inquiry? Now, I know for some of you it's been more recent, for others it's been something that has been with you for a long time, but what was it that attracted you? And secondly, in this recent engagement with the inquiry, what's the first discovery or the first impact of how this unfolded for you? So, Jerry, would you get us started, please?
Thanks, Aviv. Well, yeah. I think my first is kind of an awakening into this area was at a very tender age. I remember 3 years old. And it was then that that's the earliest time I can remember being taught by my parents about, for example, respect for authority. And so, for example, I was taught to respect the authority of a policeman on his beat coming down our road. And also, of course, as my life went on, having, excuse me, the disciplines and the respect when I was at school for the teachers. And I do remember that kind of grew into having respect for my peers, all the boys and girls that I was in class with. And that I started to realize that some of the behaviors I saw were just not right. And so some of the boys, you will be very, even at the age of 7 or 8 or 9, some of the boys would be very dominant, that's the best way I could put it, with the girls. And amongst the boys, and I know it's the way with children anyway, children can be horrible to each other, can't they? But, I saw it in excess. And I thought, no, I don't want any part of this. I can remember these sort of words out in the playground. And again, as my education went on, I can remember at secondary school meeting other young teenagers whose ways of going on were absolutely horrific. And it's my, as you might call it, the school bully. And I very quickly learned to keep out of the way, I have to say. And on the male side of that, the young teenage boys, yes, these lads had a little gang around them. And I noticed that it wasn't friendship, but it was fright that was keeping them together. And I noticed with some other boys in the class I was in, treated the girls horribly. I mean, sort of to the point, I remember one particular incident where one boy physically hurt one of the girls. And I didn't quite know what to do. I was so surprised and shocked by this awful behaviour. And then, I then took a stance about it because it was so wrong. And gradually I learned that I could call it now the ways of chivalry. I didn't have that terminology in those days. But I started to realise that the way that ladies were treated in the world, and not only in the culture I was brought up in, which is in England, but then as I became more aware, through watching the news on the TV, for example, how ladies were treated in other countries. And I came to realise that this is a kind of a worldwide thing that has happened, and how it's, well, it now, it doesn't seem to have stopped the kind of, how can I describe it? The degeneration, the falling down of the standards between men and ladies and men to men, and sometimes, to my great hurt, ladies to men. How that has degenerated to the point where I see these days that most men are frightened of most men to some degree. Most ladies mistrust most men. So I'll give you an example of when I go out for my daily walks these days. Because of the COVID virus, I'm very careful to keep a 2 metre distance between anybody whom I cross paths with. And what I find is that if I step out of the way to let somebody through on a pavement, either gender, probably 80% of the time, there's no recognition of that act. You're just blanked. And then for the rest of the 20%, half of them might just go, sort of, okay. The merest nod of recognition. And then others, like a lady who I gave way to the other day, she gave me the most lovely smile. And it was a true smile because it was with the eyes as well. I tried to put this better. How she felt to me as she passed, she felt really good. She felt like somebody that I could be a friend with. Yeah. So really that's the point I want to make for a starter, Aviv, is how I've observed through this, through this lifetime of mine, how chivalry really has been abandoned.
Mm.
It's forgotten about, you know.
Yes. Thank you. And we will retrace back to some of the themes you're exploring. Please, Marianne.
Thank you. Like Jerry, I've observed the decline in standards of human behavior. I mean, for example, my father, he's dead a few years now, but he fought in the Second World War. He was an officer in the Navy. His father before him was an officer in the Navy in the First World War. And my father was of a generation where he was taught that he should stand up when a lady enters the room. Any lady, any member of the female gender. So my father did it throughout his life, whether it was a cleaning lady or a duchess, he would treat them the same. And that's how he was taught, but also, thankfully, that's how he was in himself, because he was a fine gentleman, and I miss him. I'm very lucky that he was my father. But he tried to teach that to my brother, and my brother has that decency, but he doesn't go so far with it. So I already see a slippage of the standard there. I think human beings are hardwired to want to help each other and to respect each other, because you can see that in the behavior of children. If you put them in a playground together, mostly they share and they help each other and they collaborate and cooperate. And if somebody falls down, a hand goes out to help them get up. Also, I know that if you're in a shop and you see a lady trying to get through the door with a baby buggy and 3 or 4 bags of shopping, your first instinct, and it doesn't matter who you are or who she is, to hold open the door for her. So I think respect and decent behavior is hardwired in humans, and the opposite has to be learned. Disrespect is something that you learn, and you learn it from TV programs. I mean, look at what passes for entertainment these days. So it bothers me, you see, that Jerry mentioned about the way ladies are treated in the world. Ladies do not feel safe in the world. I have a daughter, she's 31. She's one of the bravest young ladies I know. She'll happily go off and hike around South America on her own. But in a city environment, she doesn't. She gets spooked by, the idea of, there was a recent case in London where a lady was abducted and murdered by a police officer, and that spooked her. And I thought, my God, if it spooks her, how's it going to be with all the other ladies on the planet? And ladies grow up having to live in a constant state of self-protection. We know, for example, that you don't get a flat on the ground floor. You carry your keys in your pocket. You lock your car doors when you're driving. All little things like that. And the protection of the vulnerable and the giving of a voice to the people who have no voice, I think that's part of chivalry and something that is needed in the world. And it really cries out for it. That's what I've got to say at this time.
Yeah, thank you. So let me just ask you before we get the next voice on.
Okay.
Some of the people watching this will even have a struggle with how you use the word lady, because they'd like to talk about women and women rather than ladies. And you deliberately choose this word. So that is, what would you say to that, to ease somebody who is saying, yeah, all this about respect and the way you use the language is nice, but it's outdated, it's Victorian time. It's how would you ease them to stay with what it is you're actually saying?
Well, what I know about, being a female, you're born a female and you grow into a woman, but being a lady is something that you can choose to be or not. And I like to speak about women, if you like, as ladies, because I like to give them the credit for being ladies, even if they're not.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
So who is ready to come next, please?
Hi, Aviv. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I absolutely agree with what's been said already. And I'd like to add another couple of threads to this conversation. I remember, similar to yourself, Jerry, I remember being quite young, probably 7 years old, 6 years old. And in England, we had these books that were called Ladybird books. Fabulous, small books, introductory into many different aspects of life. And I remember reading one of these books, which introduced the idea of, I think it was the Sleeping Beauty, the tale, the legend from many, many years ago. And I remember distinctly a picture of a man, and he was battling through this thicket, this overgrown wood, you know, and he got a few tears and a few rips from a few thorns, but he was battling through. And what I remember really distinctly about the experience was feeling how heroic I felt this imaginary man was in this picture. It was an artist's rendition, of course. But somehow that heroism spoke to me very directly, and I would not consider myself to be a special case in that at all, because I think there is something very natural in all human beings and all people that responds to the idea of a sort of a heroic something. And I would hasten to add that heroism comes in all kinds of forms, and I'm not alluding to some great, huge sort of gesture or quest, but actually in the very small moment-to-moment, day-by-day instances. There's much heroism that already goes on, which I think is fabulous, and I would really want to celebrate that in every small instance that it occurs, whether it's in my affairs, in my life, or someone else's. It matters not. It has a real inherent value. And so this brings me to the first thread that I would bring in, which is really to do with the development of one's own personal character. And I couldn't really tell you exactly how that started to move in me or form up in me. I'm really not quite sure. I haven't made that trace yet. But what I certainly can say is that somehow the whole idea of character, it feels very natural and it feels very important. And it also feels very dignified. The idea that there would be certain qualities or traits that you could recognize a person by. And we could all, I'm sure, find examples from history, examples of things such as coats of arms and shields, whereby somebody is trying to tell you that this is what I stand for. This is what I'm about. This is who I am. And although things like shields, to a large extent, may be something considered quite historic, well, I don't see why that has to be the case at all. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that I will have a shield painted on my car or something necessarily, or you know, wear a shield. But I have actually, on a couple of occasions, put myself to the question of, well, what am I about? What is this man about? And what do I hold dear? And what's important to me and why? And it's a really good exercise to do. It's quite testing, it's quite searching, and quite challenging, but certainly recommended. And somehow the whole idea and feeling of standing for something, that you've decided for yourself, not something that you've necessarily inherited. There's nothing wrong with that, but the idea that you can decide for oneself because you feel something is important, you're going to take it up. You're going to choose to be this way. I think is a fabulous thing, and it's really something which we can all do if we choose, because we all have that gift, if you like, of being able to make a decision and choose. And I've always found it very impressive when I've met somebody who has worked out for themselves and taken the time and trouble about something. I've always been really impressed by that, quite naturally. So really that would be what I would say. The second thread I'll keep brief, because there's many of us here and I don't want to hog the action, but I would like to mention it because I feel it's sort of tantalizing, really, for me at least, and that is to do with the whole idea of adventurism in a modern age or a modern time. Because again, the whole idea of adventure, immediately things come to mind and things can get conjured up, and you can think of the Mount Everests and the going to Antarctica. And of course, really, I think the majority of the planet we live on has been explored and investigated, even lots of the depths of the oceans, you know, the Jacques Cousteaus of the world. But what about the adventurism of the mind? And what about the adventurism of discovery, to discover things, discover perhaps something that was never discovered before? And so it doesn't always have to take on this physical kind of dimension of doing a 10,000-mile journey. There's nothing, again, I wouldn't, nothing wrong with that. But somehow I feel very personally compelled by the idea of voyages of discovery. And one of the themes of chivalry for me is the idea of quest. And so one of the questions I've been asking myself is, how does quest take on a life in the age we're living in now? What kind of quests can you have? And what would they be for? And what would they be about? So that's going to be just remain as a taster. I thought I'll drop that one in.
That's great. Thank you. So we're beginning to develop a whole loom of considerations here, all the way from Jerry starting us with just the discovery of right and wrong, and then the sense of behavior and decency in behavior, and Marianne building this awareness to men and ladies, or gentlemen and ladies, and the place of that, and the exampleship that we sometimes get from people that demonstrate this sense of value for others and respect and mutual respect. And Jeremy is getting us to begin to consider this idea of character formation and character development, and now adventurism. So, Boaz, where would you like to take us next?
Okay. The situation that we are talking, I can't take it out. It's a word that what is governing our life from the time I was born is competition and power. And it came in these recent years to very, very acute polarity between rich and poor, between this thinking, between men and ladies, all polarity. Now, if we are hoping to some change in the coming future or in the far future, which is the very thing that motivate my life, it will be done by people, with mutuality between people, and with mutuality, which will find the new code of conduct that will enable every human being to have the right to be a human being, to have the right to experience emanation and potential, to fulfill his potentiality, even if he is poor and even if he is not poor, doesn't matter. And this mutuality is part of the challenge of the human being. I once went to somewhere and I saw a title in some company, which I remember till today, which was said, people with people makes people. Yeah, which is very peculiar one, because together we need together to find a new mutuality and a new code of conduct between all these parts which are in polarity now, to allow easement, to allow flow, to allow peace behavior, which will minimize the polarity and will enable to bring something that the world everyone is waiting for it, even unconsciously. And you can see it, because yesterday I helped someone to find a place in the street. I was in the elevator and he asked me how to find this. And in the first minute I was bothered, I didn't want to answer him. And the second I said, okay, you follow me. And when I told him, you follow me, I saw him follow me. And when he saw the place that he was seeking, I felt that he was thankful. Not because he found the place, but because I responded to him, yes? And it's part of beginning of mutuality. There are there are many levels to this ladder of mutuality, starting with the simple things and going to very delicate things. And what is important to know that it's not easy. And this is the word valiance come to it, because the barrier between the high potential and the human condition today, there is a big block which barrier the connection. And this barrier should be removed just by valiance, not in the manner of being a fighter in the army, not in this manner. Be a valiance inside everyone in his quest inside, and to radiate it outside with a togetherness of quest, if I may say. Last thing I will say, the word is very interesting. Why you use the word is, and is E-S-E. So I'll finish with the energy as energy.
Which is, are you doing as a Hebrew speaker to Hebrew speaker?
No,
about I-S or E-A-S-E?
E-A-S-E.
Okay.
Yes, energy as energy. When the energy is energy, there is mutuality. So it's a thinking I thought. So. No, that's for now. I think that we have, if chivalry in Hebrew is horse, the meaning of chivalry in Hebrew is horse. Yes, Abir is horse in the Bible. So we have two options. The horse will go without our control, or that we are leading the horse. And I think that this is the quest, how we go to the future, not falling from the horse, but leading the horse. And this is part of another thinking. So thank you.
Well, just to clarify this last part. So are you suggesting that we are each riding a horse, the horse is inside, and we have the opportunity to tame or direct or govern the horse within the mindfulness and the choices of our values and what we deem is important. Am I interpreting
Yes.
correctly?
Yes,
The
the difference between an animal or a human.
right. Thank you.